we ask for your blessings now. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, if you could open your Bibles to Romans chapter 1. As you know, we've been going through the book of Romans, somewhat at a slug's pace. And I can promise you that will continue. I keep saying we're going to speed it up, but the more you get into the book of Romans and the letter that Paul wrote to the Roman Christians, the more you recognize that this is too good to rush through. You know, there's just so much here that is at the heart of our Christian theology, right? What we believe to be the truth about God. And today we're going to really talk about an uplifting topic, the wrath of God. Now, it's interesting because starting with verse 18, probably through chapter 3, I want to say verse 20, it's almost as though Paul enters into this kind of courtroom setting, and he pours out this indictment on the human race. So when I say that, I gave the general outline to this letter in the introduction and a few studies after that. But I did give a broad generalization of the first 8 chapters. And really, it was the issue of righteousness that's being dealt with here. In fact, some argue that the theme of the entire letter is God's righteousness. Some will say it's salvation, and I don't know that we have to quibble over that. But ultimately, and we'll get into this a bit more, but really starting with verse 18, you start to get this idea that we got a problem. The human race has a problem, and it's the fallenness of man and unrighteousness. Now, the first 8 chapters deal with the issue of righteousness, and I think that captures it because one of the issues is unrighteousness. And how does God deal with that? And then probably even more personally, how does he deal specifically with certain types of sin, certain types of unrighteousness? And, you know, what are those signs of a society in moral decay? It's interesting. So there's different ways that God's wrath will manifest itself. I don't know that we'll get into a lot of that today. Lord willing, next study, we will. But I want to really focus on the first, verses 18 through 23 today, where we get a sense for this change in tone from Paul, where now he's starting to deal with the unrighteousness of man, and more specifically, as I mentioned, God's wrath. You know, I find it interesting that God's wrath, it's an attribute that people aren't comfortable with, right? God's love, everyone likes that. And even within the church, Christians can sometimes approach the topic of God's wrath apologetically. You know, but, you know, that, and even in error say, yeah, but that was the God of the Old Testament. Well, we're going to read these verses, and I think you'll see that the God of the Old Testament is the same God of the New Testament. And, you know, but really that's what we're talking about here, is that one of God's attributes is his wrath. And I don't think we have any reason to shy away from that, nor do I believe it creates a contradiction of an all-loving, all-righteous God, but yet a God who is a righteous judge. It doesn't. They're perfectly consistent with one another. And I'll give you an example I was thinking about. You know, how does that really show itself in real life? Let's say, you know, I was thinking about it from the terms of a father. I'm a father. My kids are grown now, which, by the way, I wasn't here last week because my daughter is now married to Matthew. So congratulations. You've seen him here before, so that's where I was. We had a little elopement marriage. These days you can't have big weddings, but just a handful of us were able to get together, and I was honored to be able to lead their nuptials. And so instead of seeing the back of Matthew's head when he vowed to take care of my daughter, I saw his eyeballs. And he said, I will. So Matthew, I'm watching you, right? But it was a blessing. It was wonderful. So I thank Elder Joseph for stepping in. But nonetheless, I was thinking about it from a parental perspective. Let's say I was the nicest dad on the block, right? Everybody thought, oh, Mr. DeLeon's the coolest dude. He's a cool dad. He comes out and plays basketball with us. He throws the football. And everyone thought it was really cool. What a loving dad. He's always hanging with his kids. But let's say that some stranger showed up and started whooping on my kids, tried to take them, tried to abduct them. And I sat there and I just watched. I didn't do anything about it. Would you still think I'm a loving dad? Would you? Or would you think that I've abdicated my responsibility as a loving father? I've just given that up. Do you know that when we sin, typically, as sinners, we sin against one another? That's what we do. We sin against one another. We hurt one another with our sins. Sin is a separator. It ruins relationships. And typically our sins are poured out against other human beings. Do you think God in heaven, our all-loving Father, would still be an all-loving Father and just watch without doing anything, without judging it, without stepping in? Would you really think he's still loving if he did nothing about it? So do you see there is no contradiction between it? In that example, I would clearly step out and go protect my children, right? Same Bob, same loving father, but whoa, don't mess with his kids, because you'll see a side of him, and yes, I know how tall I am, but I'm scary, trust me. You'll see a side of me that you probably won't like. And hopefully it's scary enough to thwart the attack. But the point being, that's how God sees sin against his children in his world, in his creation. He doesn't like it. And he's going to do something about it in this world or the next. So it's very consistent. So I would encourage you to not shy away from that attribute of our Father. It's a very important attribute that reinforces the fact that we serve a very, very loving God. So the other part of it, too, is that we're now about to enter into verses that I would call current-day cultural landmines, right? Societal issues that people think, oh, you judgmental Christians, I can't believe you think that. Let me just kind of remind you of a couple of things, and I think it's important for all of us here to remember. When confronted with people who get angry about certain Christian beliefs we have and what we believe is sin and wrong and immoral, I just encourage you, and I remind myself, to just share with them that, first of all, the Bible's been around a long time, okay? Thousands of years, arguably. Matter of fact, 40 different people, authors, contributed to the books of the Bible. 40. Both Old Testament and New. And it was written over a period of roughly 1,500 years. Of course, we know the author is the Holy Spirit. That's why there's no contradictions if you really think about it. It all ties together because it's the same author. But ultimately, it was written and completed over 2,000 years ago. In fact, the last 4 letters that made their way into the Bible were completed between AD 90 and AD 96. Okay? In fact, the oldest many believe was probably between AD 94 and AD 96, the book of Revelation. The other 3 are 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. Okay? So those are probably written in the 90s. So the point is, it was written and completed over 2,000 years ago, and I didn't write it. You didn't write it. But it teaches certain things. Now, I believe everything that's written in the Bible. And as Christians, the question you got to ask yourself, do you believe everything written? Is it the literal Word of God? I believe it is. And if it's in the Bible, that is my core belief. But if you don't like what I believe or what we believe, don't get mad at us. Your issue is with who? God. So as we get into some of these hot button issues, I don't know that's going to drive up our subscribers, right? Subscriptions, Ryan, keep an eye on those. We're about to go from 10 to 5. They're not popular beliefs. And I'm grateful we can still say them. I don't know how much longer, but we can. But I think it's important to recognize that, hey, listen, you're yelling at the wrong guy. I didn't write this stuff. I believe it, and that's at the heart of what makes me who I am. That feeds into my Judeo-Christian worldview, why I have certain views in general on societal issues. But I think that's important as well. And we just share that, right? If you have an issue, take it up with God. Don't take it up with me. I just teach God's word. I do my best to do it in a manner that accurately reflects the meaning of the passage as well as how we can apply it. And that's why I pray, and that's why some of you pray for me, so thank you for that, and all the other teachers here at the church. We pray for the Holy Spirit to guide our words so that we're accurate. But on the other hand, our real core belief here at Calvary Chapel is to teach through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, for this very reason that you can't avoid the controversial issues. You got to deal with them. You got to deal with the passages. And so therefore, you'll find that on TV, a lot of teachers, the charismatic ones, and you know that, man, you just feel so good about yourself every time you stop watching that study, which isn't a bad thing, but they avoid the topic of sin, right? That drives down ratings, subscriptions, and can't afford to do that. So, but we can't do that at Calvary Chapel because we have different pastors. I can't say we all are on the same page from a theological perspective, but I can say this: we're all committed to teaching through the Bible. So with that, I think that's good enough of a backdrop, and as a result, it kind of brings us to the topic at hand today, God's wrath, and really, you know, what it is, why is God so upset as people view it, and more importantly, and we'll get into this next time, how does it show itself? But we're going to have plenty to work with here this morning to get an idea of how God really does treat sin. So with that, I think we're ready to get cracking on this. But again, hopefully we have a good idea now that God's love is in perfect harmony with God's wrath, right? Parallel attributes, they both exist, they go hand in hand. So what is it? What is the wrath of God? How do we define that? Well, I have a short definition for you, and it's this: God's wrath is his personal anger against sin. That easy enough to remember? God hates sin. So God's wrath is his personal anger against it. And Paul introduces this to the Christians in Rome. And in many respects, he's sharing it with us today, is that sin is a bad thing, and God hates it. But what's interesting to me is that the first 17 verses that we read, his introduction, right? It was Paul's introduction. But in many respects, it was kind of good news. He talked about the gospel. There is good news. I think I mentioned to you before, when I first started training, I was in the medical device industry forever. And I started off, in fact, my son and I were talking about it yesterday, I started off as a sales rep. I worked for Johnson & Johnson in the early 90s, and my job was to get kicked out of operating rooms by CJ here. Actually, no, but I was a sales rep. And my job was to go introduce myself to neurosurgeons, orthopedic spine surgeons, and sell them the products they would use to perform their surgeries, their procedures. And so it was very tough for a guy who just did horribly in biology and chemistry and in college. This was not my wheelhouse. Nonetheless, God put me there as a sales rep, and I had to go through training, obviously. And the first thing they train you on is on what good anatomy looks like. I had to see a healthy brain, a healthy spine, a healthy spinal column. You remember how many cervical and thoracic and lumbar vertebrae you have. You have a sacrum back there that's all fused together, and you start, you think about the brain and then the dura and the brain matter and, all these different terms that CJ is very familiar with. But I had to learn all that because I had to enter into some kind of meaningful discussion with a neurosurgeon. But the point is, I got to see what good anatomy looks like. That's a healthy spine. That's a healthy brain. And then all of a sudden, they put up a diseased spine, a diseased brain, and you go, whoa, right? Brother Vince might even know about that. You look at a spinal column healthy, and then when you have a couple of collapsed discs, that's not good. So in many respects, the first 17 verses of this letter that Paul wrote, he's kind of giving good news, right? Remember we were talking about the gospel of God. It's the power, right? It's his power demonstrated through salvation. First to the Jew and then to the Greek, but ultimately God's power leads to salvation. That's good stuff. And talked about the righteousness of God. We talked about that. What a great deal, right? How that when we believe in Jesus, okay? Because remember, it's the power of God to salvation to who? To those who believe. So for those who are being saved, it's because they believe. They believe in Jesus. And when we do that, we talked about last time righteousness. It's a very important word. In this letter, Paul's going to use it over 35 times, just letter alone, righteousness. And we talked about in the Greek, it takes on two meanings. It can mean righteousness, God's perfect, holy character, faithfulness, but it can also mean justification. And for us, it's just as if I never sinned. Justify. That means that when I stand before God, it will be just as if I had never sinned, thus resulting in the verdict of not guilty. So not only do I have I'll be viewed with God's holy righteousness. That'll be how he sees me. That righteousness has been imputed, put into me. The righteousness of Jesus Christ. So when God sees me, he sees my righteousness because he sees his son's righteousness in me. And then he says, not guilty because I'm justified. It's just as if I had never, ever sinned. Where did my sin go? I gave it to Jesus. And guess what? That sin was judged already. And where was it judged? On the cross. Right? So that's just amazing. What a deal. Best deal going. You give me all your sin, that's what Jesus tells us. Give me all the bad stuff that you're ashamed of, even the secret sins that you're doing, even to this day, even though you believe in me and you're following me, you still mess up and you know it. Give all that to me. And I'm going to die in your place on the cross so that the Father can judge it. And it has been judged 2,000 years ago. But now let me give you something in return. Here, take this. What's that? My righteousness. I'm going to put that inside you, Bob. And when you stand before my Father one day, which we all will, the Father's going to look at me and say, man, you've never sinned. Isn't that something? What a deal. That is the Christian faith. Now, if there's something, if you want to go knock on doors, you want to crawl on your hands and knees over glass, whatever you want to think it is that's going to make you right with God, go at it. I like this one because it's real and it speaks the condition of man. So, last time we were together, we ended at verse 17, where it talked about God's righteousness. And I think it's important, because now what Paul's going to do, he's going to pivot from that to now the issue of God's wrath. So why don't we go ahead and read verses 18 through 23, and then we'll just talk about these scriptures, because they are powerful. And again, picture us entering into a courtroom. And now Paul is going to lay out the indictment, the charges against the human race. And this is going to go on from verses 18 all the way to chapter 3, verse 20. The rest of chapter 1 will be on basically Gentiles. And then in chapter 2, he turns his attention to Jews all the way through. So what's the point? We all have fallen short of God's glory. We've all sinned. We all need salvation. So he's going to spend the balance of chapter 1 talking about Gentiles, right? And just literally how their idolatry, their immorality summon God's wrath. And of course, when we get to the Jews, it's going to be more with their pride. It's going to be more with their disobedience and their judgmental view of other people. He'll deal with that. So let's go ahead and read verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Wow. I mean, just reading that, if you sit back and say, holy Toledo, this is not good. Ryan, you almost got me to laugh. We got a problem here, right? Is what I'm reading, is that Paul's tone changes pretty abruptly, and he talks about the wrath of God. Let me get my notes to catch up with me. So we talked about in verse 18, for the wrath of God. We already talked about one working definition, right? God's, anger against sin. But on the other hand, I thought there was an even more comprehensive description. And actually, what the wrath of God is not. Okay? We know what God's wrath is, but what isn't it? I'll give you this. It's from John MacArthur. I really liked it. It said, it is not an impulsive outburst of anger aimed capriciously at people whom God does not like. It is the settled, determined response of a righteous God against sin. Capricious means to be this haphazard, you just have no idea, right? It's just abrupt. And that's what we think about. I think that's partly why we have an issue with wrath, the wrath of God, because we think about it in human terms. Maybe we grew up in a household where we had a family member, a parent, who was like that. There was no rhyme or reason to their outbursts. Do you know that that word in the Greek, it's actually orgi, or ye? In the Greek, you know what it means? It really actually has a ripening fruit connotation. Meaning, as you think about fruit, it ripens over time, right? But it's a period of time. It's controlled. And that's what we're talking about here. God's wrath is not this, right, flying off the handle. Romans 2:5, we're going to get to that. I think that's a great definition of God's wrath. It's just controlled. It's settled. He's long-suffering. He waits. It's not haphazard. We don't wake up every morning wondering, what kind of God are we going to have today? Do you have any people like that in your life? It could be bosses. It could be teachers. It could be a wife, a husband, children. It's like you just never know when they're going to go off the handle. And in many respects, I think that's how we envision God's wrath, is that he's just like, such a good mood this morning. And then one little sin, he flies off the handle. And here it comes. That's not the wrath of God. God's wrath is what we just talked about. It's a settled, determined response against what? Sin. And I think that's important because ultimately, the reason Paul started off this letter talking about the gospel and salvation and the good news about Jesus and all that great stuff, right? The power of God and salvation, so that we can appreciate the bad news. And what's the bad news? Is that we have a sin problem. Within the human heart, we have a sin issue. And a person will not appreciate the good news until what? They understand the bad news. So Paul's about to get into the bad news. And so in verse 18 he says, "For the wrath of God is revealed." That word revealed isn't a once and done reveal. It's already been revealed once and done. No. It's a constantly revealing aspect of God. It's always being revealed in some manner when God decides to reveal it, and for whatever reasons he chooses to do so. So the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against two things: all ungodliness and unrighteousness. Okay, so ungodliness means basically those who lack reverence for God, and unrighteousness meaning those who lack that holy conduct and character and that right relationship with the Lord. It's being revealed against that. But specifically, why is God revealing his wrath? And why does Paul bring it into the letter at this point? Because he says that the wrath of God is being revealed against all ungodliness and all unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness, again, do what? Now we get to the first reason. Suppress the truth. Right? What are they doing? They're suppressing the truth. Now, I think I mentioned to you, Marnie and I, after a multi-year journey, finally finished the Bible together. So we just started again. And this time we want to cut it down to 2 years. That gives us every other day we can skip a day, kind of a deal. But nonetheless, Lord willing, we'll get through it in the next couple of years. But the point is that I love in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, when God talks about placing his image on his creation, right? He has made men and women in his image. We have God's stamp in our heart. And in fact, I had a friend call me. It was such a blessing. We hadn't really talked for like 20 years, and then all of a sudden we've talked more in the past few months than we have in 20 years. And that was one of those relationships that, and maybe I thank the pandemic for that in that regard, is that it made me start thinking about the fact, you know what? I want to make sure that if anything happens, I have no unresolved relationships out there. You know what I mean? At least to the best that I can make them right and reconcile. I don't want to leave this earth having regrets about, man, I wish I had just asked that person for forgiveness. And there's been a few of those in the last several months, for me at least. I really hadn't even thought about it that much, but then God started revealing more and more and more. I got to make it right with him. There's no guarantee I'll be around, and it might not be the virus. It could be anything. I don't know the number of my days, nor do you. So I want to make sure I'm ready, no matter what. Get my affairs in order. More critically, though, I want to make sure that relationships are right. And we got into this discussion. And I shared with him, that the issue, one of the issues is that it's good you're feeling this way. He's not a believer. It's good you're feeling this way, but you know why you have that conscience? Is because God has stamped in you his image. People who suppress the truth are suppressing this fact that they are made in the image of God. And the reason why we have consciences, the reason why we feel bad about things when we do them, that's because God has placed in us a conscience. And no, it's not Jiminy Cricket. God's Spirit convicts us. Now, as believers, we know that, right? When we do something, we're convicted, right? We know we've sinned against God, sinned against the Holy Spirit. When we're not believers, we still have a conscience, and that's what led me to salvation, is this nagging thing knowing I got to get right with God. There's something wrong. All these Christians who keep pestering me about going to church. Go see this Raw Reese movie. Go see this. It's like, what is the deal? But in my heart of hearts, I could no longer suppress the truth because I knew they were right. I knew I had to get right with God. I knew there was a God, and I had to get right with him. One of the reasons why God is exercising wrath is that man, at that then and today, or mankind, humankind, whatever word makes you feel better, either way, his creation was suppressing the truth that they should know, right? Because we have that knowledge in our hearts. God stamped it there of his existence. But it goes on to say, for what can be known about God is plain to them, right? Not only through the conscience we've been given, because God has shown it to them, verse 20, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since what? The creation of the world. So God's wrath is being exercised because not only do men suppress the truth, this divine stamp that we all have from him, made in his image, but secondly, it's because they are ignoring God's revelation through creation. It says, God has shown it to them, his invisible attributes, right? His power, his divine nature have been clearly, think about that, clearly. It's like there's no shadow of a doubt to it. It's clear to everybody through the creation of the world. And that's something. God, right, who's invisible, unknowable, right, has made himself visible and knowable. How? Through creation. I love that. It's through creation. You know what? I love apologetics. I've gotten away from it. When I first started coming to Calvary Artesia, or at that time Cerritos, I started going to Biola. They had these apologetic series. I'm telling you, they were awesome. They were like 8 lectures over an 8-week period. And Pastor Dave was kind enough to allow me to go twice to do 2 different sets of programs. But nonetheless, in apologetics, it's basically a defense of the faith, right? And you have some skilled people, Christians, who just, man, they just know all the arguments. Well, one of the arguments is something called teleological, the teleological argument. And basically, it's arguing that God exists through design. In fact, I'll give you a more proper definition. It's arguing the existence of God from the evidence of order and hence design in nature. So in other words, God reveals himself, right? He's invisible, unknowable. He makes himself known through what he created. Think about it as an artist, right? Let's say I were an artist. Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Come on. I can draw stickmen, CJ. You would know nothing about the fact that I was an artist. Laura, do you know an artist? Good answer. You don't know. But how would you know I'm an artist? How would I reveal myself? Through my art, through my painting. Otherwise, I'm non-existent. I'm the greatest artist in the world. I just haven't showed it. But the minute I make known or want you to know I'm an artist, I'm going to paint a picture. Do you know that God decided to make himself known through creation? The divine artist made himself known. He that was invisible and unknowable is now visible and knowable because he painted this beautiful design called creation. I love that. David put it this way: the heavens declare the glory of God. The sky above proclaims his handiwork. Psalm 19:1. And what's cool is that we went through Acts, and the Apostle Paul talked a lot about nature, and in Acts chapter 14, verses 15 through 17, when he was in Lystra. But nonetheless, the point's still the same, is that what God is saying is that his wrath is being shown because, one, they're suppressing the truth, but then secondly, they're ignoring, right? They are ignoring his revelation through creation because it's clearly perceived in verse 20, clearly perceived since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So what? They are without excuse. What does that mean? That means every human being, when they stand before God, are without excuse for not knowing God. I'm going to play this clip. It may or may not fit, but I have just been fascinated with this, these uncontacted tribes, okay, these unreached people groups. And we know that a lot of them are near the Amazon. In fact, on the border of Brazil and Peru, they've even carved out an area for uncontacted tribes. These are people that have never seen the outside world. I was watching this video, and they even captured on video the first contact. The first contact this tribe ever had with the outside world, they captured it on video. It is just amazing. But nonetheless, I want to play a clip of this. And this is 9 months after the first contact, okay, that we're about to play. 9 months after that first contact. I want you to listen how they think.
Quando ele morre, pergunta para ele assim, quando ele morre, ele vai para onde?
Do kai ia. Da te ho mira. Ana o sai ba da te ho ho. Do kai pa ia te do da ya pa kai, do da ya pa kai. Na ia chi pa si ari. Do ya pu do te ho, do ya pu no a ho misti a ho ato do te ho. Tôi được tiêu độ.
Tem com pichal lá.
Tôi được tiêu họ cúp pichal họ.
E ele acha que o Braga também vai para o mesmo lugar depois da morte?
Đào vào scala đó đi abespa ya đào mà tôi được tiêu cả tôi đã hơi nhiều tiêu ao được tiêu mà ao được tiêu mà yêu em mà được tiêu đại phúc chỉ đi đua đại đã học được cái tàu alia được tiêu ta đi đại chụp bác sĩ ăn được sĩ cả tiêu em phải bài tiêu bài à.
Brother, isn't that amazing? How do they know that? How do these unreached people groups, remember, they had no contact with the outside world up to 9 months prior to that clip. But yet they have this knowledge through creation, the sky, the river, that something happens after death. You know what that's called? Theological terms? General revelation. You know what general revelation is? It's that anybody at any time can know that God exists through creation. That is general revelation. Or, as I go back to the teleological argument, arguing God exists through order, through design. These never seen the outside world type people in their hearts know that something happens after they die. Isn't that crazy? They know it. They know it. How? God has stamped it in their hearts, and he's made himself knowable through creation. They're looking up at the sky saying, I think that's where we go after we die. How do they know that? We're seeing it. It's real. So what happens after general revelation, in case you're wondering, okay, what happened to them? I don't know. But I know this. General revelation is for everybody. But if we respond to the light that we've been given, God will reveal more of himself. And then you get to what they call special revelation, where someone comes into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. Isn't that cool? God is so good, man. So if you're up at night wondering about what happens to the people in the deepest, darkest jungles of the Amazon, well, God's working, okay? Worry about the people in front of you. Worry about the people at work, your neighbors, your schoolmates, your teammates, whatever it might be. Worry about their salvation before worrying about those. And don't use that as your excuse for not believing in Jesus, because God's got them. How about you? Have you responded to God's general revelation yet? Well, if not, we'll give you a chance here momentarily. But nonetheless, so we can see it, right? So there's no excuse. Verse 21, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. So, at the heart of their sin, it says it right here, is that they failed to recognize the value of God. You know, we're all guilty of that. Sometimes we fail to recognize the value of our salvation. Hey, listen, I give my life back to Christ in 1997. That's 23 years ago. Is it? Yeah, 23. And, early on, man, I couldn't host enough Bible studies. I couldn't listen to enough Bible studies or go to church enough and hand out tracts, and I was so worried about everybody's salvation. And then as you start to mature and grow and it becomes part of your life, right, the sanctification process we talked about, you sometimes wake up and you just forget about it in a sense. You know, you forget to recognize that you are a saved human being, that you're a child of God, and he loves you and he has a plan for you and me. And I think sometimes we lack appreciation. But that's kind of normal, right? That's why every single day, we want to be filled with the Holy Spirit daily, to be reminded of the goodness of God. So if you have that issue right now, how do you deal with it? Rededicate yourself, discipline yourself for godliness through, prayer every day, reading the Word every day. Doesn't have to be a 10-hour, read, just 20 minutes in the Word. Talk and surround yourself with other believers and share your faith. That's how you get back on fire if you're in that funk. But nonetheless, their sin isn't that. At the heart of their sin is their failure to value God above everything else, anything else. And what's that result in? What did it result in for them? Keep reading, right? They didn't honor him as God or give thanks to him, which is really the issue, right? So they are they did not honor God, and here's the issue. It results in them not giving thanks to him. And that's the other issue, is that despite the fact that God revealed himself, both he stamped them with his image, creation, they not only did not value God above everything else, that led to the not thanking and praising God. You know that as a parent, and I've dealt with it, but even as a manager all those years, all you ever want is a thank you, right? All you ever want is a thank you. You don't have to pay me. You ever give somebody a gift and they got you nothing? Immediately their reaction is, I got to go out and buy them a gift. Right? And for Christmas, for example, we just had Christmas. For those of you who figured out how to give gifts, good. But did you give a gift to somebody who wasn't expecting a gift? Or, more personally, did you receive a gift from somebody you didn't expect to receive it from? Isn't your natural reaction to immediately go out and buy them something back? Now, if you did, that's great. But the point is that, all that person probably really wanted was you to just say, thank you. And that was all they wanted. Just seeing you or me happy, that's my gift. Gratitude. You're happy about it. You appreciate it. As parents, that's all we want. It's just show the gratitude, right? By going out and running with everything that you've been given. That's all parents want. I don't want to be paid back monetarily, although, Jess, Joe, if you want to pay me back something, I am retired. But it's just run with it now. That's all the gratitude. Walk with the Lord. Have a relationship with him. Do something with all this. I don't want to just keep hearing thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and then you don't do anything with it as well. Do something with it, and that's God. He just wanted to hear thank you and do something, which is what? Enjoy him. Enjoy this relationship we can now have. That's my thank you. Creation, just do something with what I did with my son. Do something with the truth I've revealed. And more specifically, let's have a relationship. And I think that goes for all human relationships, right? We just want to have relationships, good, meaningful relationships. I don't want anything out of it other than great fellowship and great relationship, mutual love for one another. But that didn't happen. Verse 22, claiming to be wise, they became fools. I don't think I finished verse 21 here. But they became futile in their thinking and their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay, keep going. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. So, what's interesting to me about that is that even the most intellectual of intellectuals are going to be humiliated when they stand before Jesus if they haven't believed. I don't care how brilliant they are, their arguments against God. Do you understand what's going to happen to those people? And I don't say that with any joy. It is going to be not only horrifying, it's going to be humiliating. Because they thought they were brilliant, right? Claiming to be wise, they're going to be the biggest fools that ever existed. And they won't be alone, sadly. Because they came up with all these fancy arguments about why God doesn't exist. Or how can a loving God send somebody to hell? I think we dealt with that. God doesn't send people to hell. People, they send themselves. Why? They suppress the truth that's revealed through creation. God's made himself known. He sent his son. What more do you want him to do? So ultimately, though, these intellectuals will come face to face with Jesus. So I don't get wrapped up with people who have fancy arguments against God or get all worked up about Christians or the Christian community. And I don't get fired up about it because, I ultimately, like David, I saw their end. I know what's going to happen. I don't take any joy in that. By them rejecting the truth about God, they've allowed their hearts to become darkened, like we just read, right? Their foolish hearts were darkened, hardened hearts. Pastor Rich taught about Pharaoh had a hardened heart. And then, of course, the worst part is that they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. So by rejecting the truth, their hearts become darkened, hardened, and they miss the entire purpose of their lives, which leads to this futile existence. I mean, how many times do you hear people, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm here for. I'm so confused. God has given all he could possibly give to make it obvious why we're here. I think Micah summed it up great. Micah 6:8. You probably know this verse. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to do what? To walk humbly with your God. That's why we're here, brothers and sisters, to enjoy fellowship and a relationship with our Creator. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. They exchanged the glory of God for images resembling mortal man. So the third reason why God's going to pour out his wrath here is idolatry. Worshiping something other than God himself. Now, we think about idolatry in terms of what they used to face, right? They had little statues, whether it was the Romans or you had in the Mediterranean, ancient East, they had these half men, half animals that they would worship, and Egypt worshiped their gods like that as well. In even modern day, I worship idols. I worship saints, little San Martin, and I had these other little saints, and we would pray to them. And I don't mean to demean our Catholic friends, but ultimately, we already dealt with that. There's only, there's one God and one mediator between God and man, and that's the man Christ Jesus, right? We know that. So you don't need to go through idols. You go to Jesus himself personally. But we have idols today, and we'll end it here. What are today's idols? Money, all right? What else? Cars. I like your car. It's nice. What? Status. Absolutely. Toa, any guess? Sports, ours, right? Sports or hobbies or passions. Oh, purses. Right? So materialism, absolutely, right? We worship material things. Those have become idols to us. Politics, politicians. There's all kinds of things that we start to worship, created things more than the Creator. God's desire is that we give all of our devotion, all of our love to Him and Him alone. It starts with God, ends with God. That's where our hearts need to be. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. So if anybody has to fight this off, church, it's us. These idols that can come into our life. What we should desire is a right relationship with the Lord, and that comes through believing in Jesus Christ. Believing the good news of the gospel that leads to salvation. So for those of you who are listening right now, if you don't have that right relationship with Jesus, He longs to have it with you. Simple prayer away. Lord Jesus, come into my life, come into my heart. Forgive me of my sins. I want you to be my Savior, my Lord, my God. I want to follow you and live for you for the rest of the days of my life. If you believe in the heart that Jesus is Lord and that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. That's it, a prayer away. If not, by rejecting that love offering of Jesus Christ, you are subject to the wrath of God. And we'll talk more about that next time we get together. I know you can hardly wait, but it's important. Important attribute of our all-loving God. Let's pray. So, Father, thank you again for this day, this study, and your word, Lord. May it continue to encourage us, Lord, but also remind us of just how much you disdain sin because it hurts your creation, Lord. It hurts our relationship with you. It hurts our relationship with one another. And because you are an all-loving Father, anything that hurts your children, you do not like, and you will deal with it. But for us, Lord, may we be reminded of the fact that we are not subject to your wrath. We've been saved through Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross. We've given him our sin, and it's been judged on the cross, and he's given us his righteousness, and we're justified now just before you, Lord, just as we never sinned, and we're not guilty. Thank you, Father. And now we're free to have a right relationship with you, Lord, to love you beyond anything and everything in this world. And Father God, I pray for anybody who's either listening online or who's here this morning, if there's anything that's become an idol in our hearts, Lord, if we've traded anything in for just a maniacal focus just on you and you alone, Lord, that you would forgive us, because apart from you, we can do nothing. So continue to protect us, Lord, guide us, use us this week. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for our salvation. Protect your people, Lord. Protect my brothers and sisters here and online. And we ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, God bless you. Thank you. Next time we get together, Lord willing, we'll finish chapter 1. But I appreciate you fellowshipping with us today. Have a blessed week. God bless.